And firstly, to thank Senator Doherty for engaging with me on the amendments, especially the very important ones, I think, where we add the addition in of class. I think it really gives context to some of the scenarios in which we've seen unfold. But let me start by expressing my solidarity and love and support to all affected by the attack at Gaelscoil, Coláiste Mira last week. Those students will have that attack printed on their little minds forever, as will their parents, carers and teaching staff. They should have every support made available to them. Although I wasn't as young as them when I witnessed my first knife attack, I know that the market lives inside your body and inside your heart. None of them have left my mind since Thursday. Watching what unfolded afterwards also had a profound impact on my spiritual and even physical self in terms of the historical trauma that lives in my body from seeing those who live on the fringes turn on each other and minority communities. If only they knew they were just as screwed over by the system and even less powerless. While we will mostly focus on reaction and response, we should try to understand why and how we got here. In reflecting on this question myself in recent days, I time and time again am struck by the role that those with political influence and power play in creating the conditions that lead to disorder we witnessed on last Thursday. Do you accept accountability, or do you wish to distract from it by calling for more boots on the ground? The oppressed will always be asked if they condone violence, if they condone this crime or that crime. Yet capitalistic violence, especially that of the last 30 years, imposed by successive formations of the same government parties, has gone unaccounted for. The structural violence this has imposed and the lack of safety it has created in our communities is not inseparable from the lack of safety created by riots. One is just more concentrated in place. Why don't we respond with the same passion and outrage when it comes to the housing crisis, the health crisis, the education crisis, the poverty crisis? In looking at other policies where I see is violent, austerity, violent, not safe. Children being raised in hotels, violent, not safe. Direct provision, violent, not safe. Our drug laws, violent, not safe. The state oppression of travellers, violent, not safe. Underfunding of mental health, violent, not safe. Prison, violent, not safe. The guards not answering calls to domestic violence victims, violent, not safe. Treatment of single mothers and austerity policies that crippled them, violent, not safe. The referendum in 2004 on citizenship, violent, not safe. Poverty amongst their citizens with a disability, violent, not safe. Failure to those in state care and aftercare, violent, not safe. Homelessness, violent, not safe. When do we take accountability for the lack of safety and violence? But it seems to be okay if it's in a legitimate form of legislation. Violence is violence. Do we condone the state in which we create that also creates the conditions where people do not feel safe? Angela Davis once said that despite the important gains of the anti-racist social movements, that racism hides from view within the institutional structures. Although we are not the US, in terms of our history, the same is true here. Racism exists in our structures, just as classism always has. If only there was cohesion between the two struggles, we would be a hell of a lot closer to liberation. Let's ask ourselves where and in what structures has this state, since its inception, built division into its very fabric. This conversation goes above and beyond individual acts of racism and violence, which of course must never be tolerated. However, when it comes to movements, there is a clear intersection between class and race, but issues have become individualistic under global capitalism. This leaves a hole for those who hold supremacist views to undermine every community in this country. And when it's not migrants they'll focus on, it will be the LGBT community, it will be women, and each and every time the state fails as citizens, we hand more of our young men over to those malice actors. This state, in equal collaboration with its citizens, needs to accept and evaluate the historical conditions which motivate the present. There are many people who don't condone the riots, but who feel very disenfranchised and excluded from living a good life. They may not be on the streets, but they are there judging this government and those before this government for their failures. They are part of this conversation too. Some of Foucault's work looks at the objectivisation of what he calls subject. the person being divided in themselves or divided from others, such as the sane, the insane, the rich, the poor, the criminal, the good bias. These divisions are cemented in policy and structure and in the language of scumbags and thugs, Minister. We must work to understand violence in and of itself, but instead yesterday in the Chamber, one senator said they should be convicted. But who is they and who are they? Instead of asking why is where we are at and how can we create a better society, the senator wants to just jail them. And to what end? When has prison ever solved violence? According to Danielle Serra, the Director of Common Justice, a restorative justice programme in New York, there are 4 core drivers of violence. They are shame, they are isolation, they are exposure to violence and an inability to meet one's economic needs. The very organised far right have fed off all 4 of those things. Experiencing violence along with feelings of shame, humiliation, exploitation and oppression is a driver of violence. And we all want to end violence, we all want safety, but for some reason we refuse to look at its causes. The best way to stem the reach and furthering of the agenda of fascists is by creating a fairer society and equal conditions for all. John Paul Sartre once said, "Violence is good for those who have nothing to lose." Instead today, I ask this House to consider, why do people feel that they have nothing to lose?
Thank you.